On today's show, perhaps the most somber of all mailbag Mondays as the Padres get swept by the Dodgers this weekend. Going to be talking about all the biggest mistakes from you, Darvish and Dylan Cease, to maybe even Mike Shildt's lineup decisions and a whole lot more, as well as answer your questions. So let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Monday, August 18th. As always, I'm your host, with sometimes the most, Javier Reyes, and I've been covering this team for almost 6 years now, not just for this podcast, but various other outlets, including JustBaseball.com, chief among them. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is right around the corner, so visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. Be sure to go check that out, and be sure to go check me out on the socials, on Twitter, /X, and Blue Sky, at Javipeno, Javiipeno. Feel free to reach out on there with any questions, comments, or concerns. Love interacting with you guys. And since it's the Monday mailbag, we will be reacting to some of your questions that you sent in. But first, ladies and gentlemen, we got to talk about this weekend because it was a disaster. We're going to be talking about the weekend, talking about the good and the bad, mostly bad. And look, I mean, just to start off, right? Like, this was a series that, no holds barred, in my opinion, is one of the most important that they've had regular season wise, at least since I've been covering them, but probably over the last decade or so. Regular season series, not playoffs. Obviously, playoff series always matter more, right? But in terms of regular season series, this one is really, really up there. And the Padres lost each and every game. Now, I will say, right, that each game has some lessons from it. And what's it called? We can use those to kind of chart a path forward and figure out what to keep an eye on for this team going forward, because it is not fair to totally abandon the Padres considering how well they had played since the deadline, and why a lot of that was due to the deadline additions from Merlin Laureano to Mason Miller to Ryan O'Hearn, all these guys, Freddie Fermin, like just upgrading the team, seeing some players start to turn things around, with Xander Bogaerts being probably the prime example of a guy who has really broken out in the second half of this season. Frankly, the last 2 months, he's been really, really good, I think, overall. But with this team, it's still, man, like, it's just, for you to have all this momentum, man, is really, really rough, right? So my biggest takeaways from the weekend. First of all, yesterday's game, they lose. It wasn't a walk-off, right? But bottom of the eighth, Mookie Betts homers off of Robert Suarez. We're going to actually answer a mailbag question about Suarez in a little bit. But Darvish was really bad in this game. And then Saturday's game, Dylan Cease was also really bad. So one of the takeaways from this weekend is the rotation. And this was always going to be a question. Now, do I think that the Padres rotation, in theory, is good enough to win a World Series? I do. I think that when Michael King is healthy, I think with a Darvish, he can have a good postseason spot. And then you chip together with the bullpen, and then you have Nick Pivetta, right? And then allegedly, you'd have Dylan Cease. I still do kind of believe that that is World Series caliber. However, right, with the losses of Steven Kulik and Ryan Berger, and with Michael King going back on the IL, which I talked with my boy Jake Ariani on Friday, so feel free to go check that out. Talked about all the conspiracies that I may have about it too, so please go check that out, that episode, and get back to me. That this team, do they have enough to get them over the finish line, I think, is the bigger question. I, for one, think they kind of do. Right? I just believe that Dylan Cease can at least have a couple starts towards the end of the season against bad teams, right? Where he can just produce and fill out innings. I do think he could be productive. Be good? Not necessarily, right? I think that this was kind of the last straw for me. For Dylan Cease. And I know that it's like literally mid-August, and you might be wondering, why have you refused to kill this guy? Because part of me has been like, well, he shouldn't be this bad. Like, I have not seen a pitcher sell and just completely blow up their potential in the free agent market this badly in a long time, absent injury. I understand there's some guys that got injured, Brandon Woodruff being another good example, right? But to have this bad of a season right when you're entering free agency is pretty unbelievable, right? So those are some takeaways. I am a little bit worried about the rotation. But specifically, I will say, with Darvish, right, I think that the pressure is on him more with King landing on the IL and Kulik and Berger no longer being here. But for me, it's Dylan Cease is the bigger thing. I simply cannot approach the rest of the season thinking, if I am the Padres, that this guy can start a playoff game. Straight up. That's it. I'm done. On Saturday's game, not only did he have one of his worst starts in a little bit, he goes 3 1/3, gives up 3 earned runs. Granted, 5 runs were given up, only 3 were earned. There was an error by Jackson Merrill in this game, but he walked 6, so it's not like I can blame all of that on just one Merrill error that derailed the whole inning. No, he walked 6 batters, which was by far the most he's had in a long time. Now, he did have 5 walks against the Mets, which is, in fairness, a pretty good team, and he also got, blasted in the head in that game, so I'm going to give him a little bit of a break. But besides that, he did have a 5-walk game against the Dodgers previously, but he also struck out 11 and it was pretty good. He went 7. But for you to have this bad of a game, right? At one point in this game, the Padres were out hitting the Dodgers, something like 5 hits to 1 or whatever it was, right? And the Dodgers had no hits, and they were somehow up 4 runs, right? That's the situation that we were in with this team. 5 runs, actually. And a big reason for that is because all their players got thrown out trying to steal bases. Now, one of them I don't think was an out. I will say I think that they actually got robbed. I think it was the Machado one. But for you to get all of your guys thrown out, to have an error by Jackson Merrill, and for Dylan Cease to walk 6, that is not what a team that is prepared, and I know this isn't a statistical argument, which is what I like to do on this show, but that is a little bit of a sign of bad management. A little bit. At least a bad managed series, let's call it. You guys were not prepared. To have these fundamental errors, have your pitcher walk 6 guys, including, just letting runs in, against a team that you are up 1 game on in the division, that's just horrid, right? And I understand that, they only did lose the other 2 games in the series by 1 run. So I think that is worth bringing that up, right? But overall, that is just an atrocious display by the Padres. And there's still a lot of other complaints that I have, right? In terms of just the overall bad news, let's get that out of the way. Like I said, by far the most important series they've had regular season wise in a while, and by far the best chance you've had at taking a commanding lead in this division in the last decade. And not only did you have that Saturday game, you also had Sunday's game. You also had Friday's game, in which you couldn't hit, right? Sunday's game, you at least put up 4 runs and Robert Suarez blew it. And Friday's game, just nothing. It's Ramon Laureano. What does Manny Machado do? Goes 0 for 4. What does Xander Bogaerts do? 0 for 4. Jackson Merrill goes 2 for 4, which was nice, and Ramon Laureano did hit a home run. He's one of the good takeaways from this weekend. Jay Cronenworth, nothing. Fernando Tatis Jr., he does draw a walk. But that's it. Nope. They can't hit against Clayton Kershaw for some reason. He only has 3 strikeouts in this game. I did not think that he looked untouchable or whatever. This is not prime Kershaw. You should not be getting shut down like this. Wandy Peralta had to start the game. Whatever. Randy Vasquez, he did what he could. And Jeremiah Estrada gave up a run. But whatever. Bottom line is the offense did not show up, right? And there's a bunch of other bad things that this team did that really annoyed me from this weekend that we got to talk about in the second segment, guys. But first, I just need to take a word to talk about one of our sponsors. And one of our sponsors is our friends over at The Picks that are very much worth the prize. That is Prize Picks, guys, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football isn't far behind. Whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. What I love about the lineups is you just need a certain amount of wins. They got you some free wins every now and then. They'll just be like, hey, here's a free win. You need 4 or 5 every day. You just pick the over-under that they give you. You're good to go. It's much simpler. It's great. So shout out Prize Picks. But again, that's code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you first play $5. Prize Picks, run your game. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast, thriving and vibing as always. Go check me out on the socials at Twitter/X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, Javiipeno. Let's continue talking about some of the bad things that happened this weekend. Some other things. So, like I said, you by far have your best chance in a decade, and you played probably your worst baseball possible. The Padres now have a 2-8 record against the Dodgers on the season. So, guess what? The Dodgers own the tiebreaker. Coming into that 2-5, if you just took 2, maybe lost 1, whatever, it would have at least been theoretically possible for you to own the tiebreaker over them. Granted, not a likeliness thing, but you just got completely killed, right? And by the way, that is by far the worst record they have against any team in baseball this year. Some exceptions, right? Obviously, they don't play everybody as much as the Dodgers, but 0-3 against Toronto, 0-3 against Seattle, those 2 sweeps. Other than that, by far the worst that they've played. They even split against Philly, a team that they've been struggling with in the past, but the Dodgers did not show up this weekend. And Dodgers coming off a sweep, by the way. getting swept by the Angels, and you lollygag into the stadium and just got your butts kicked basically all weekend, right? That's what it felt like this weekend. And Jackson Merrill's injured, by the way. He had to get removed from the game. They brought in Gavin Sheets for Sunday's game. But that's not all, guys. Let's talk about at least some of the good news, right? Which you might be surprised by. Javi, you've been angry this whole podcast. Well, yeah, I am angry. I think that this was genuinely one of the more pathetic displays, and I do put some of that on Mike Shildt. Just not, like, I have to give a little bit. I'm not saying I want him fired. I'm not saying I want him replaced. I'm not saying I want to outwardly attack any of his things. But for this weekend, I think it was a badly managed series. Like, it's a sign of just not being in your heads weren't right? But let's talk about the good news. The good news is that there's still a month and change of baseball left, and there's one more series against the Dodgers. So yes, you don't own the tiebreaker over them, so the destiny isn't in your hands as much anymore. But the Dodgers could still lose a games. You could take a few games. It's still just 2 games, right? It's still just 2 games, and you have one more series against them. So let's say you win 2 out of 3 against them in the next series in Petco on your home turf. Then it's like, okay, cool. We made up for the sweep at least a little bit, right? Granted, the Dodgers now get to play the Rockies, right? Which is probably going to be a good series for them. We can't rely on bad teams sweeping them. That's why this series was so important, because you were the good team that should be able to go in there and throw some haymakers and really keep them down. So that way, even if they are able to beat the Rockies this week, it would have been a little bit of a moot point, right? But whatever, Padres didn't show up. Anyway, the other thing is this. Here on the Locked On Padres podcast, we're always growing, but I must say, this is by far the most I've gotten comments. All right? Big growing podcast. This is by far the most comments that I have received on a video from Dodgers fans, or several videos, every episode basically last week. The Dodgers internet mob attacked. By far the most comments. So Spin Zone, they're scared of us. That's what we can do, right? I'm mostly kidding about this point, but I just want to bring up, like, they're excited about this win for a reason. Dodgers fans. It's because they were actually genuinely like, oh my God, what I was thinking, which is you can't win the NL West every year, and that's still in play, right? Like the Dodgers could still absolutely lose this. And another good thing, as AJ Cassavell pointed out, the Dodgers likely won't be the top seed this year thanks to the Brewers and their huge winning streak. So it's likely that at least the Padres won't have the Dodgers on their side of the bracket, which I prefer. Could we still face them in the NL West? Is it that I'm terrified of the Dodgers and beating them in the playoffs? No, it's just cool. We won't have to face them that early. And let's say if they choke, which they mostly have over the course of the last decade, before they spend $1.5 billion, if that were to happen, I am more than happy with playing Milwaukee or frankly any of the other NL playoff teams for the most part. I would feel a little bit better about those teams than the Dodgers, especially after what I saw this series. And again, decent series, right? Laureano had 2 home runs in this one. They only lost by 1 in 2 of the games, right? So at least they were close with the exception of Saturday. And the last kind of point is that Tatis was actually okay. Right, he actually had a decent series. In Saturday's game, he went 2 for 3 with a walk, and on Sunday's game, he went 1 for 5 with a RBI as well. Like, he had a double. So that was nice, right? Like, at least he had a little bit of a series, a tiny bit of one. But, folks, that isn't it. We got to talk about some of your questions that have to relate to this series, because I think that this is basically as bad as they could have played. I really do believe that. And there's a lot of people who are upset. I think that one point that a lot of you brought up, so I'm just going to bring it up on my own and not read a direct question. But Mike Shildt's management, I think, was taken into question this weekend, because on top of the Mason Miller thing, right, which is Robert Suarez, you bring him in to pitch to Mookie Betts. I don't hate that as much as everybody else, but I still don't love it because it still is the top of the lineup. I would rather bring in who and raw stuff is your best relief pitcher in Mason Miller, especially because did they use Estrada at this point? They used Jeremiah Estrada at this point. They used Monahan at this point. I would have rather used the guy who's not supposed to be the closer, which is Mason Miller. I know Mookie Betts has been bad, though, this year, right? Like, he hasn't been a very good player. But for Betts, Freeman, and Will Smith, I would much rather bring in the best of the best stuff. And Mike Shildt didn't do it. So it's kind of like, well, then what was the point of bringing in Mason Miller? So I didn't like that decision. And the next decision is, why does Luis Ariz have a monopoly on the top of the lineup? Again, this makes it sound like I'm hating on Mike Shildt. I am a tiny bit, but just for this weekend. Because I do think that he's earned the benefit of the doubt, especially with, remember guys, they had a great winning streak before this series. They've been playing great ball. It's important to remember that. But I do have to wonder, with Ryan O'Hearn just sitting on the bench, given what you gave up to the Orioles for Laureano, who is playing every day, And then O'Hearn, who had been a 130 WRC plus guy, and by the way has a 120-ish WRC plus against lefties this year. Why does Arise have a monopoly not just on that second spot in the lineup, but also to play at DH? I don't understand that. Why isn't Ryan O'Hearn playing? He literally is better than Arise at lefties. Like, that's literally a thing this year. And Luis Arise has become really, really frustrating to watch. And I think I'm starting to see a lot of you commenters, listeners, viewers, people on Twitter, people on Reddit starting to be like, yeah, this guy is really annoying. He's way too streaky. He swings at bad pitches. It's kind of rough, and I don't like him in the second spot in the order, despite the fact that in theory I do like the idea of Tatis draws a walk, maybe he can steal second, or Arise just needs a single. But how many times has that happened this year? Think about that for a second. How many times has it felt like we started off like really dangerously? I would much prefer if we did Tatis, Merrill, maybe Machado, then I don't know, O'Hearn or Sheets, and then maybe Arise, and then maybe Bogarts. I would just much rather prefer that. I would, but what do I know? I'm not the manager. So we will have to see if they finally change off of that. But let's talk about some of the mailbag questions you guys sent in for today's episode, guys. Firstly, let me see. Let's talk about this. Yeah, a lot of Dodger fans comments this week. I just want to once again say what I always say. Any Dodgers fans who call the Padres the Madres, you are telling on yourself, right? You are telling on yourself and making yourself look like a jerk, right? Because why is being referenced as a mom some sort of derogatory, right? Like that reveals a lot about you as a person. That's stupid, right? I get that it's funny, but just say Padres, right? I say that myself sometimes. Padres is right there. Right? Uniforms, all that stuff. It's right there. Madres, there's just something about that that's annoying. You know what I mean? And as someone who is close with their Bob especially, I'm like, I'm not saying that they're trying to take deep shots at women or anything like that. But I'm just saying it's lame. You just look dumb when you use that. Let's grow up a little bit, guys. But some of the comments that I did like. So who won the trade deadline? Says at Kenji Steven Nakama 7133. I hope that's a Nakama like One Piece reference. That'd be nice. But so who won the trade deadline? Not the Padres. Dodgers swept them 8-2 against them and get the tiebreaker. Padres still won. Or at least are one of the winners of the deadline, to be clear. One series doesn't change that, right? They had been playing well against this before the series. But I do want to give a credit for the comments that do make me laugh from the haters. From at Dylan Favela 2454. Padres on the loose. Let's go. And then with the goose emoji. That's what's in. I have to admit, it gets me every time. It gets me every time. There's two jokes that Dodgers fans make about the Padres that actually get me. The That's What's in Goose video, one of the worst things that's ever been presented for a Padre fan perspective, right? Horrible. Whoever hasn't seen it, just look up Padres, Phillies, like Bryce Harper, That's What's in. You'll find it, right? And then the video of after the Padres won the wild card and the fans are dancing in the street. Dodgers fans will sometimes tweet that video and be like, the Padres won a game against the Rockies or something like that. And it actually does make me laugh. It genuinely does. But the rest of the comments, not so much. Especially one like this. At Evelyn Ayala, S4R says, didn't Javier say this was a super team? LOL. Dodgers will always find the way to beat the Madres. There we go again. Machado, again, more of the acting like being the other, something feminine is bad. Machado always crying. Maybe if he would stop crying for every strike call, you guys would win. That's just not true, right? Empirically speaking, Machado doesn't complain after every call. Like, let's relax. And I think he was one of the people that was thrown out, and he was probably safe. But we are not done yet, guys. We got more questions to get into in just a second. Because I got to talk to you guys about our friends over at the Duelist of Fandom. You know what I mean? I'm kidding, guys. What I mean is FanDuel. And August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day. Coming up in just 8 days, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast, thriving and vibing in spite of it all. In spite of it all, folks. Remember, Twitter/X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, to have a chance to get your stuff listened to and answered on the show. or the YouTube comments, which we are leading a lot from this weekend. But Rama Murdy, who is always reliable with the questions. Hi, Javier. Question from Monday's show via Blue Sky. After this miserable weekend for the Padres, on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your confidence level for a deep playoff run? Well, I'd say it's like a 3.5. Right? I still think that this could be a playoff team. And again, things change in the postseason. If the Dodgers blow it like to the Mets or whoever the heck is going to make it, right? Like, all of a sudden, the Padres, everyone's going to be like, oh man, like their arch nemesis is out of the way. Maybe they can win. And I'm not scared of Milwaukee personally. Why? Because Milwaukee is 20th in payroll. And historically speaking, over the last 32 seasons, I believe it is in baseball, only 3 teams have ever won the World Series that were outside the top half of teams in payroll. And only one of those was a true outlier. I believe it was the Marlins in 2002, 2003, whatever year they won. And they were like 24th in payroll, right? Like, and then there's like a 16th and an 18th in payroll type of teams, right? I believe the Astros could have been one of those years. I believe they were only like 16th in payroll, maybe 2017. I don't have it in front of me, but just historically speaking, a team like the Brewers does not go far into the postseason because they don't spend. They're all the cute little players they have, Andrew Vaughn, Bryce Terang. Those guys, we just, historically speaking, are not going to do what they did season long in just a shortened series against a really good team. Right? What are they going to do when Blake Snell's pitching against them? All those guys you have are probably not going to show up, with some exception, right? So I'm not really afraid of the Brewers. So I still have decent confidence that they could have a good run. At Lil Shroom says, haha, Javi, Marty is a woman, referring to Marty Caswell, who I referenced on last week's show in regards to some quotes. I believe, I forgot what it was regarding. I think it was about Freddie Fermin. My bad. I just went on autopilot, apparently. I know that Marty Caswell's a woman. Shout out to Marty. But I think I said, like, my guy, which is something that I frankly say to everybody. I like calling everybody dude as well. It's just a dumb, quirk of mine. I'm not saying I'm respecting everybody. I'm just saying I tend to do that. And let's just be honest. I'm not trying to act like I'm defending myself for getting this wrong, but a lot of men in this space in sports. So I just kind of was on autopilot and had no idea I even said this. So apologies for that. Had no idea that I misgendered or messed up with Marty there. Had no idea until I saw this comment. So thank you guys. I appreciate your comments. See, sometimes you help me. At AZ Cervera, I'm going to say 8613 says, mailbag question. Curious to know what you thought about your visit to San Diego and Petco Park. How does the city ballpark and atmosphere in general compare to other parks you've been to? I will say I loved it. I've been to Petco Park now twice. Once was 2 months ago or so with all my friends, and then the other time was about a couple weeks ago with one of my friends. We just stayed at one hotel. We went to that big walk-off game against the Mets, for those who don't know, and it was a blast. I love the atmosphere. I love Gaslamp. Like, that's awesome. The vibe is spectacular. The lamp vibe, just seeing the strollers or whatever those are called that have the lights on them, just start, going down the street. It's a really great vibe, and it was awesome following the game. And I loved it. I will say, though, I'm not an expert in ballparks. I've only been to a few. I've only been to Old Citi Field, or Old Met Stadium, Shea Stadium. I've only been to Old Yankee Stadium, New Yankee Stadium. I've been to Nationals Park, and I've been to Citizens Bank, Phillies, and then now Petco. I haven't been to other ballparks. So, I'm just bringing that up that I can't compare it to all of those entirely. But I really did have a blast. And I think that the food around the area was great, too. The Mexican food's so good over there, man. I miss it already. Great stuff indeed. Let's see. At EMCZ4RD mentions, look, it doesn't matter if you hit the team. This is why slugging and home runs are so important. I agree. This is why I have critiqued something we heard preseason, which was how the Padres really they prioritize this kind of low strikeout line drive approach. And I'm like, I'm cool with that. But for winning regular season games, the home runs are pretty big, I think. And again, that could be in defense of them. Maybe the Padres are like, we care about postseason. We're good enough to make the playoffs, but maybe postseason, we just want guys who don't strike out too much and could just be solid batters who drive in runs. Maybe that's what they think. But given their history, right, you give the Yuli Gurriels of the world, it's like sometimes they play guys that don't strike out but aren't really doing anything for you. Luis Arraez is one of those players right now, right? So, but I agree overall. We had a very loud comment from @MikeVQ again. He said, I'm not worried about the Padres pitching because Dylan Cease will never face the Dodgers again in a playoff game. The offense, on the other hand, everyone should be concerned about. Without the new bottom of the order thanks to the Baltimore trade, just offense would still be crawling along at a pathetically inconsistent pace. Time for these guys at the top to find consistency for a change. I will say Manny's been a little bit slumping lately, but he's been carrying the team all season, so I can't hate on him. Luis Arraez, I agree, and Tatis, I agree to an extent. However, he is a good leadoff hitter because of the walks and the speed. As someone else commented, @McCastleberry 1980 says, people dragging on Tatis, right? Asking why he's still leading off. He's top 20 in on-base percentage, tied for third in runs scored, and top 15 in stolen bases, all leading the Padres with only Ryan O'Hearn having a higher OBP, but that was mostly in Baltimore, right? He just got here. He's doing what leadoff guys do, get on and get in. Yeah, I'd like to see him crushing the ball like he was earlier, but he's a menace on the base fast when he's on. It's really fascinating, the kind of, issues we have here with Tatis. Where, I think fans know he's good, but fans are understandably really frustrated being like, yeah, we know he was good, but why is he just a walk specialist defense player now? I kind of relate. So it's a really difficult thing where I am frustrated with Tatis too, but it's not like he's a bad player. He's actually very good. It's this hard thing to balance, right? You know what I mean? It's really hard. I don't actually fully know my opinion on it for sure. So we'll have to see how that goes. But again, what can I say? We will see. @Andrew BLTRN5249 says, you guys will forever be the Clippers of the MLB. Unfortunately, got to hand it to the Dodger fans on that one. Not entirely wrong. @Aaron Thomas 1843 says, Padres don't have swagger. Sometimes it looks as if they are not playing hard and no identity. I think they should trade Tatis. Here it is. Because he's clearly not the player he was a few years ago and can't close out games against the Dodgers. The idea of trading Tatis, who's top 10 in wins above replacement right now, it just doesn't make any sense. He's young. You have him under control. They're not trading Tatis. And I know that everybody does this when the Padres have a bad series or a bad stretch. MLB Network, ESPN, all the national media, whatever. They talk about trading Tatis. It's happened before. It has. We've literally seen people contrive BS about Tatis before, right? ESPN Radio, one segment a few years back when he was on suspension. I think it was I think this was just the injury, I believe. They're like, hey, I heard Tatis, man, to the Yankees. It's like, no, it's like, stop. This is just what national media does a lot of times. I'm not saying that this commenter was that, but they want to put all the star players at the big markets. It's what they do. So there's a bias inherently with kind of reporting these things. Tatis isn't getting traded, though. It's just not happening. And last question I want to talk about really, really quickly, @Evelyn Ayala, he says, bro, who cares if he's hitting the ball hard? That doesn't count, in referring to Tatis. One more time, for all the casuals out there, I like to bring up how hard players are hitting the ball, because that tells you whether what they're doing is real or not real, or vice versa, and depending on the situation. If a player like Luis Arraez isn't hitting the ball hard, I don't cite that, because he's never been a hard hit ball guy. Xander Bogaerts, I cite it a little bit, because if I see a spike in hard hit rate, that usually tends to be more hits are going to leave the infield, right? It's going faster. It's going to lead to more extra bases. It's going to lead to home runs. That's what hard hit rate tells you. But with Xander Bogaerts, it's not like it's the be-all, end-all that he's in the top percentile, because he's been a good hitter. He's a hitter, not necessarily a slugger. But if I see someone like Tatis or Manny Machado, guys that have hit 40 home run, that have 40 home run power potential, if I see hard hit rates decline for them, it matters. And that's why I bring up with Tatis and why he's been so frustrating, because he's still hitting the ball hard, right? He's walking, and yet he has no slug, right? So again, it's more than that for Tatis, but these stats do tell you something. And the reason I also like bringing it up is because people like this who say it doesn't matter, it just all that matters is getting the hit, you're the type of person that would be like, Adam Frazier sounds great. And then if you look into the advanced stats, you say, well, I mean, I'm not saying he'll be awful, but Adam Frazier doesn't hit the ball hard, and nothing has changed. So sometimes you can get really lucky in baseball and your batting average can go up. So that's why I like bringing up hard hit rate on this show. There's some questions that we didn't get to on today, especially about Freddie Fermin, which we're going to save for tomorrow's show as we recap the series. And because it's going to be such a weird schedule for tomorrow, the episode should be up. To make up for today's delay in uploading, guys, stay tuned. The episode for tomorrow, recapping the game, and a couple more of these mailbag questions will be live by the time you wake up in the morning. And that about does it For today's edition of Locked On Padres Podcast, guys, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. One more time, follow me on Twitter/X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. And until next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My very faithful homies, take care.